Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 29th of February 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, before we comment on the weather, I think we ought to say if there's any ladies out there that have still not done the deed, now is your opportunity. Proposal of marriage, of course.
Yes, of course.
So there we are. I just thought I'd remind you on that. Now, the weather. The weather is excellent in Plymouth. It's cold but sunny. We've even had blue sky. Same reports from Manchester, southeast London, Hampshire, all looking good. Not so good in Rhondda, a bit cold and claggy. And I think Glasgow is a bit on the cold side and overcast. But not to worry, because the referendum is hotting up. And of course, David Cameron and his full Tory cabinet only have our best interests at heart, Mike.
Absolutely. I do wonder how we're going to keep talking about this for quite so long, because the fear porn is absolutely being ramped up. This is quite a subtle psychological exercise, I think. I suspect perhaps the Behavioural Insights team has had some input into how this referendum is being run. But anyway, here we go with the Mail. Judge lets Romanian rapist back into Britain because it would break EU law to deport him back to his home country. This is the fast-track deportation rules, which apparently breach human rights. So here we've got an article absolutely attempting to incite a no. But then we have other things, other fear. So we've got Britons to be forced to stop living in France and Spain if Brexit happens, because apparently as soon as the day we leave, everybody that's UK national living in France or Spain will be asked to leave as well. So more fear, but of course this is attempting to encourage people to vote yes. And then we've got this one. Brexit would negatively affect lives of millions. Official report, the UK report says. This is from the Cabinet Office. And it's quite interesting because the text of this article in The Guardian says the government's first official analysis into how Brexit would affect people. And then the next paragraph, it says, written by civil servants in the Cabinet Office. So clearly the Guardian confused about the difference between the government and the civil service.
I think we're going to touch on that a bit more, Mike, with respect to defence and who we're really talking about.
Right. So really, we don't know. Are we in or are we out? We don't know what people are supposed to think based on what the media is doing. So I just thought I'd remind everybody of what Jean Monnet said. Europe's nations should be guided towards the superstate without their people understanding. And there's clearly no understanding in what the mainstream media is doing at the moment. So what is going on? Well, of course, this is all diversionary and is designed to divert people's attention away from these two documents. We've mentioned the best of both worlds last week, and the other one is the European Council's version of it. These two documents represent the fact that this is not a simple in-out referendum as is being presented. The referendum is about these documents and whether or not we agree to their contents. And that includes, let me remind you, TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which King David says in his document, The Best of Both Worlds, that this is right at the centre, front and centre of British policy. Well, on Friday, the EU and the US finished the 12th round of talks on TTIP. Their negotiators worked, they say, towards the objective of achieving an ambitious high standard TTIP agreement that responds to both EU and US interests. The negotiators remain ready to seek to conclude their negotiations in 2016, provided that the substance is right. So they're saying they're going to complete by end of 16, early 2017. That would be before Barack Obama ends his presidency. Well, the US chief negotiator said, we still have a long way to go. But if we can sustain our current intensified engagements, we can finish our negotiations by the end of the year. And the EU's chief negotiator said, we are ready to seek to conclude negotiations in 2016, provided the substance is right. This is what they're aiming to do. This is absolutely at the centre of the EU referendum vote. This is not being discussed in the mainstream press. They're skirting around the edges and basically attempting to divert people from the fact that this and other things, but this is one of the items which is absolutely what's being voted on in June?
It's obfuscation, confusion, ignoring the facts. Everything is blurring so that the public can't see what's actually taking place, Mike.
Well, I believe that they're attempting to demoralise people to the point of
just giving up.
Well beyond disinterest.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal with any of the real issues. So they have people sort of fighting with each other on minutiae. And of course, when the vote comes along, it'll be Peter Lilly's company that counts them.
That's right. Mail today, I think the front page is Tony Blair. So suddenly we've got the subject of Tony Blair and war crimes, which of course is really going to grab people's attention. I mean that quite seriously. So that pulls them away of the dangers of the referendum. And then, of course, we've got the child abuse issue well away from government. And now we're pumping out, of course, the latest big spat between Tony Hall and Tony Blackburn. So that's distracted attention away from our corrupt criminal MPs and the subject of child abuse. And the whole thing swims around so that nobody knows where to focus.
Just as a final point on this, of course, we've got to remember, where did the European Union begin? It began as a trade deal, a free trade zone, a common market. TTIP is going to make the EU look like a walk in the park, really, isn't it?
A walk in the park, absolutely right. So in this soup of disinformation under the European referendum PSYOP, some really nasty things happening, which we've been touching on, but this particular one focuses it. Now, several people were talking about this over the weekend. It's a Hampshire school which called the police after a 15-year-old pupil had been looking at a UKIP website and actually an EDL video. Key point is that the sites he's looking at are lawful, but what happened is the school called the police. And it then ended up with an interview with a 15-year-old pupil and his father, Mick Taylor. Now, I have to say that Mick Taylor is a man who's been doing great work speaking out about what's been happening in the country. So here was Mick Taylor face to face with the reality of where David Cameron is taking this country. And this is just over a quarter of an hour, 17-minute interview that I completed over the weekend with Mick Taylor. Hear what this gentleman says in his own words about this incident at the school, where effectively he and his son were branded racists and or terrorists because they had connections with UKIP. So, Mr. Taylor, we should have you on the telephone now. Can you hear me?
Hello, Brian.
Yes. Hello, Mick. Thank you very much for coming on the phone to speak to me. Now, you've got quite a story to tell about an incident that took place at your son's school. What exactly happened?
Yeah, well, my son attends Wildon Secondary School in Hedge End, Southampton. And he's 15. He's in his last few months at school. And I've been doing a lot of stuff on immigration over the past months. But on Monday the 22nd, around late morning, dinner time, I received a phone call from the school, one of the teachers, to say Joe, my son, had accessed 2 websites that had been flagged. And they phoned the police, even without telling me. Did I want to come in and talk to police on Wednesday the 24th February, just gone at 10 o'clock? So I said, so you're willing for them to go and out me? Yeah, do you want to be there? And I said, well, yeah, of course I'm going to be there. He's a minor. And I said, what's these websites? And they said, well, they're a bit political, not sort of savoury, a bit, I forget the exact word, like activist. And so I said, okay. So 10 o'clock I turned up, and we were met in reception by the police lady. I believe she's a terrorist. She represented herself as people that agreed into ISIS and other political parties and stuff like that. So She was obviously a specialist, and I didn't take her name. We sat down at the table. I sat next to the teacher and my son, and then the police officer, policewoman. And she started talking, and I stopped the conversation, and I said to her, excuse me, I said to the teacher, what's this about? What were the two sites? And the teacher replied, well, before Christmas, your son accessed the EDL site. And I said, yeah. I said, I believe I've seen that on TV. It was on BBC last year. And I said, yeah. And what was the other website? And they said, UKIP. And I said, what? And they said, UKIP was flagged as an activist site. And I said, say that again. And the teacher looked a bit embarrassed, and he said, why? I said, say that again. And he said, UKIP was flagged as an activist site. And I said, you're telling me that UKIP was flagged as an activist site? And he said, yes. And then the police officer started, and she asked my son, her words, her exact words, are you an activist for UKIP? And I said to the police officer, you need to rephrase that. It's a political party. And I said, it's not a terrorist party. And she said, well, there are 4 million people that voted. And she said, I'll put it another way. She said, are you an activist for UKIP? And she said, do you get involved with UKIP? And then she said, what's your views? And I said, son, tell her your views. And he said, well, I think there's too many people coming into this country. And at the same time, I think UKIP could do a better job of running it. And he left it at that. And she went, can I ask you, Mr. Taylor, what your views are? So I said, yeah, you can have my views. And I said, they're quite strong. And I said, my views are, my first dad died at 52 when I was 7. He fought in the trenches for 7 years for the Dorchester Regiment. And I said, my stepdad died very young. I said he was in the Navy. And I said my uncle was one of the first in to liberate Belsen in the Second World War. So I said, my family shed a lot of blood for this country. And I said, I'm very passionate about the UK. And I said, what goes on? And I don't like to see unelected bureaucrats, put into position and give the country away. So I said, is anything wrong with those views? And they looked slightly embarrassed, and the teacher felt embarrassed. And it virtually ended on that point by the teacher. And let me get this right, the teacher looked at my son and said, oh, Joe, do you think you can change your trousers next time? You've got black jeans on instead of ordinary, instead of school trousers. And my son said, well, hang on a minute. And I thought, you've just brought a terrorist officer in here, and he's just changed the subject completely. And with that, he ended the conversation. It was almost an embarrassment. And the meeting ended, and I said, I cannot believe that you flagged UKIP as an activist site. And that was it. There was nothing more said. We got up and left the room quick, and that was it. And from there, I went out and phoned the Daily Express. And Nick Gutteridge, the reporter that took up the story, was quite interested in the fact that UKIP had been flagged as an activist site. He got in touch with the school, and they couldn't deny it. They got hold of the police. And the whole thing is just completely kicked off from there. And it's gone mad on the internet. I believe there's thousands or hundreds of thousands of hits on the story and the video. But I think myself that what's come out of this is the school is fueled a massive debate on Europe. But most of all, the thing that concerned me in my phone paper was that I thought this is not just about me and my son or the family. This is about every person in this country. Because if you're in the comfort of your own home and you access a computer and you go on a UKIP website, you're going to be flagged. You're going to be flagged as an activist, and you're going to be flagged, same as the EDL or any other terrorist organisation. And I think that's alarming. And I think it made me realise we're very quickly moving into a police state. And I've been very sharp to point this out to reporters that I spoke to about the case.
Mick, this story is incredible. It's also very simple, isn't it? That as you say, police are called to a school to interview a 15-year-old because the school apparently considers UKIP to be some sort of extremist, almost terrorist organisation. The lady police officer you said she mentioned terrorist things. Did she mention Prevent at all, which is the...
No, I didn't hear the word prevent, but she actually described herself as someone who she interviews people that are groomed in, say, if you're being groomed for ISIS and terrorist groups like that.
Right.
So, she's trained. She's obviously specially trained and obviously sent in. And as you said, Prevent, it probably was, but I didn't. To be honest, I was so gobsmacked by being flagged as an activist, or my son, that I should have gone in with a pen and paper, and I didn't expect what I was going to hear. Really, I should have taken her name or details. But I was so taken back by what he said. That's why I asked him 3 times to repeat himself, and he was almost embarrassed to do it. And it's quite alarming. And I think if...
Sorry to interject there, Mick. I was just going to say that this does not surprise me because a few months ago I was speaking to a police officer who was deeply concerned at the work the Metropolitan Police were doing, in particular, going into schools supposedly preventing extremism. But this officer felt that actually what was happening was that the police were almost grooming the children to get them into a frame of mind which would make them interested in extremism. She was deeply unhappy. And of course, the Prevent strategy, which I know hasn't been mentioned in this case, but I think it's almost certain that the police lady would have been from the Prevent team, because that's their job, to get around schools amongst other organisations. But here we've got 4 million people, more than 4 million people, who vote UKIP because they're deeply concerned at what the government's doing, principally with Europe. And now, if you dare to show an interest in UKIP, vote, or you're active, the government considers that you're some sort of semi-terrorist threat. This, as you say, is a move towards a police state.
Well, one other thing from the interview is that after they finished on the UKIP, when they asked if we were involved in the EDL, she said, "Are you involved in the English Defence League?" And I said, "My son's not. I'm with him a lot. He's in the motorbikes." And I said if he was, I'd kick his backside because he don't go out looking for trouble. And the teacher looked at me and said, "Well, it's a bit like the Baby P case." And I said, "Hang on a minute. What's that got to do with it?" And he said, "Well, parents say they're not involved in messing around with their children, but sometimes people find out they are." So I said, "So what you're saying then is like, I'm telling you my son's not involved in terrorism, and he could be." And I just said, "I think you're out of order." And he went quiet. And so it's a bizarre questioning, bizarre, a really strange interview.
Bizarre, but very sinister at the same time, Mick.
Very sinister, but it's one of the things as well, the school as well. I've known a number of... last year on the election, the school was well known that during the election period, they put out a paper, Liberal, Labour and Conservative, and they put it all around the classes, and they asked the kids to vote for a party. And a lot of the older kids said, "Look, there's no UKIP on it." And the teachers were telling them, "Well, it's not a proper political party." And so some of the kids didn't like it because they felt it wasn't right. So when you look back to last year, there's some strange stuff going on, and I think probably trying to re-educate them in some way. And but whether I should bring this up. I mean, my son had a bit of trouble at the school a year ago, and a number of people are there, and they've taken things to the school governing body. And myself, when we went to the school governing body, the school governing body always went with the school and not the parents, and we couldn't understand why. And they said, if you're not happy with our decisions, write to the Education Funding Committee. Well, myself and other people wrote to the Education Funding Committee, and they found that there had been no independent witness on the school board since it was an academy, 5 years, or must be at least 5 years. And so with that, I said to the Education Funding Committee, what are you going to do about this? And they never done nothing. And to me, it's almost like the school has become a law unto itself. And really, I've been alarmed sometime about the deputy head and the headmistress, but, you know, so you let it lie, and all of a sudden this has come up, and it's opened up a can of worms, a massive can of worms. And I just think it goes deeper than the school. And my personal opinion, knowing a bit about common purpose, and it almost seems as though that there's some of this coming to the forefront.
Right.
And that's something that, you know, maybe you could probably comment on as you're a top speaker on that. And I noticed a lot of the comments coming into the Daily Express are expressing, they're starting to say this is a bit of a case of common purpose.
Right.
And there's loads of comments coming like that.
Mick, thank you for that. That's extremely interesting. Just jumping back to the subject of UKIP, what's been the reaction from UKIP as a party to this incident? Have you learned anything about the reaction inside the party?
Press office phoned me, and there's Roy Swales, I believe he's the police commissioner. He wants an inquiry into the school and the police, what's going on, because it sounds very suspect, and he's looked at 3 angles at where they went wrong, and I forget what they are, but there's a number of issues he wants to raise. And also, I believe at UKIP, they said they couldn't have paid for this sort of debate, because it's absolutely massive, and I think it comes at a time on a debate on Europe, and I think it's just opened up a debate on Europe's moving into a surveillance society.
Yes.
And this is where it just stems from not just UKIP, but I think it involves everyone in their future.
And it comes back to this point that if you dare to disagree with the government, what the government says, what the government's policies are, if you dare to disagree, you are regarded as a threat to the government. And this is almost putting people who speak out to become dissenters in Britain in 2016.
Yeah, it's just, I said to a reporter today, I said the police, you could get burgled. There's an incident recently, a lad, £400 bike, works in a local supermarket, trained his bike up in the afternoon, somebody went through it at bolt cutters, and he was on Gumtree in the evening and saw his bike on there. And the next morning they phoned the number, the bike was up for £200, he just paid £400 for it. And this lad said, yes, it was a couple of miles down the road. He said, you can come and view it. And so they phoned the police weren't interested. And his dad said to me, so we went into the police station on the way down to the address, and they were not interested. He said, well, listen, if he's got my son's bike, there could be a bit of trouble. And with that, the police said, okay, we'll come down with you. And they knocked the door, and this 18-year-old opened the door, and it was his bike in there, and they arrested him, and then they let him go because they said he was honest. And this is what's happening, and it's the same. You could be burgled. 2 days later, the police would turn up. But if you ever thought on, if you had mentioned UKIP, you're hang on, you've got the full police coming in.
Yes. Mick, thank you very much for telling us that. I'm sure that there's going to be a great deal of comment and debate about it. And, well, I'm going to thank you for speaking out, because it's very important that when these sorts of things happen, people have the courage to actually speak out in public. So well done, if I might say that to you.
Yeah, and it's good to speak to you, Brian.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, there we are. From the reaction in the UK column chat box, we can tell that audio clip has made quite an impact, because we are now seeing the heart of the beast, which is being installed in UK. Remember, this is under David Cameron's Conservative government, 2016. If you are interested in a legitimate political party, UKIP, if you're interested in EDL, which we could say some people may have some strong reservations about, nevertheless not unlawful, but if you carry out these lawful activities, then you are flagged up as what, a potential extremist or a potential racist. And of course, the police who attended that school would almost certainly have been from the Prevent units, which many people have picked up on. And this, of course, is David Cameron's state spying system, where children have been, as the police officer told us, police have been grooming children to be alert to terrorism, and then the police are back in the schools to accuse those children of becoming terrorists.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
This young lad was in a school, looking at these websites in a school. A school is supposed to be a place of learning, and clearly one of the current affairs topics of the day is terrorism and extremism. Surely he's entitled to investigate these issues by himself within a...
I know exactly what you're saying, right? But of course the answer is in front of us, not anymore, because under David Cameron's Conservative government, you are only allowed to hold the views which David Cameron's government says. This is a dictatorship, and now we're seeing the extent of it. And let's remind ourselves of this incident which took place some time ago, but a UKIP couple had their foster children removed from care. This is Joyce Thacker, the leading lady. Let's just have a look at the comment in here. Rotherham Borough Council Strategic Director of Children and Young People Services, boss Joyce Thacker, sorry, there should be a space in there, told the BBC that her decision was influenced by UKIP's immigration policy, which she said calls for an end of the active promotion of multiculturalism. So this lady said of her own accord that UKIP was a racist party, and on that basis she said of her own accord she could take children away from UKIP parents.
And we have to remember, of course, that Joyce Thacker, as I think you're about to make the point, was in charge at Rotherham at the time of most of the child abuse. And therefore, if she is actively promoting multiculturalism, clearly she's prepared to promote multicultural abuse of children as well.
Well, this absolutely seems to be the case. But if we sum this up, we've now got 4 million plus UKIP voters essentially branded as racists or terrorists or both by Prime Minister David Cameron using Prevent. And he's going to use his police spying apparatus to get into schools to scare children and their parents. Very serious stuff. And we're going to continue to warn people that the dictatorship is not coming in the future, it's installing itself now. We covered this topic with Ian Crane a couple of nights ago, and if you go on the UK column website, if you haven't seen that edition of Humanity versus Insanity, Mike has put it in the featured video section, so you can...
On the front page, so just scroll down to about halfway down the front page and you'll see that there.
Okay.
And just to let you know that Ian Crane has finalised the speakers for the AV7 conference event. So if you haven't had a look at the Alternative View website, please have a look and do get along to that if you can. That is alternativeview.co.uk. I'll just put Alternative View 7 into Google and you'll get there. Vanessa Beeley, Dr. Graham Downing, Ian R. Crane speaking, Michael Shrimpton, Max Egan, Phil McConnell, Patrick Henningsen, Willem Felderhoff, Thomas Sheridan and Zen Gardner this year.
Right.
So what's next? I wanted to highlight this this article here from Dan Glazebrook in Russia Today. Who are the real culprits behind the UK's collapsing public services? Because this is a point we've been making for quite a long time, and it's good to see this this view coming from a relatively mainstream journalist. So what he says here is, anyone following David Cameron's negotiations with the EU or the subsequent in-out referendum debate in Britain would perhaps be forgiven for believing that migration is the cause of Britain's woes. Cameron himself has been cultivating the link in voters' minds between migration and public service decline since at least 2013, when he made clear his desire to prevent migrants from accessing public services and even the NHS. And so he finishes off by saying, this is precisely, after he discusses this quite a bit more, he says this is precisely what's happening with migrants. They're being scapegoated for a collapse in public services that is the inevitable consequence of government's policy of transferring wealth from public sector to the private, a collapse that would still be occurring even if not a single foreigner had set foot on British soil in the last 20 years. Indeed, it would likely be far worse given their role in actually providing Britain's public services as low-paid workers. Where Lanchester is wrong, however, is simply bad luck. Okay, so he's been talking about that during the article. Do read it. And he finishes off by saying, knowing their own culpability, the British government are willfully and cynically directing anger away from themselves and the billionaire class they represent and towards some of the most vulnerable in society. Yeah. This is the oldest trick in the book. Well, indeed it is, Brian, but people still fall for it.
Well, what we can do is keep pumping out the truth as we see it and analysing the situation, Mike, and asking all the people who are awake with UK Column to stay effectively on theme. We have to alert people to the fact that Britain is being destroyed from the inside. It is our own politicians and their fraudulent banking backers who are the enemy of the state. We've called them traitors. We've warned about the treason. And now, of course, with the public sector institutions collapsing, we can absolutely see the fruits of these people. So it's no good fighting amongst each other, and it's no good pointing fingers at people within the NHS, for example. The people responsible ultimately are the people who sit in Parliament, criminals and traitors, and of course we know perverts. Not all of them, most.
Russia now, and this is another article I wanted to highlight from Russia Insider. The US is planning a colour revolution in Russia, but Putin is ready. They're saying Putin has urged the FSB to suppress any attempts at foreign influence in the upcoming general election in Russia. If you read between the lines, Putin is warning about a colour revolution coming to Russia, but Russia is ready. And they give a number of quotes from this. I'm not really going to say very much more about it. Do have a read at this article. It's very interesting and quite to the point. But in the meantime, we have NATO counting down to the summit for 2016, which is being held in Warsaw this year. It was in Wales last year, of course. And this is a discussion at the Warsaw office of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, which is one of these think tanks. It hosted Ambassador Douglas E. Lute, for example, and I just wanted to quote him from this because it said he said that he's confident that during the Warsaw summit there will be solidarity between NATO's allies and that the summit itself will mark the beginning of a new phase in NATO's history. He said, I believe that the summit in Warsaw will be the moment of obvious transition to the next phase. Why do I say this? Because now in 2016, it's obvious that NATO, as it was for the last 25 years, ceased to be valid. Above all, Russia is not a strategic partner. So that is quite threatening in many ways. And it looks like NATO intending to ramp things up even further in the coming year.
While assisting the formation of the European military forces, I would suggest, Mike.
Indeed. And of course, Russia, the main target, Russia active within Syria. Let's just remind you of the talk tomorrow night in Frome. Please do get to this if you can. Robert Stewart talking about how the BBC has been presenting particularly this documentary called Saving Syria's Children. If you understand how they pulled this one off, you can understand what the broader activities of the BBC. So please do get along to this if you can in Frome tomorrow night.
Okay, well, we're going to stay, Mike, on the subject of war and so-called defence. And we'll come in with this one. We're recapping here some of the information we tried to show last week, but it's important we come back onto it. Here's the UK Parliament site, and we've got the Defence Commons Select Committee talking about Russia, implications for UK defence and security. And amongst the text and comment on that website, we were particularly interested by this statement. What more can the UK do to use mass media and social media to engage with the Russian public directly rather than just via the Russian leadership? Now, what this is talking about, of course, is subversion. It's getting to the Russian public and putting propaganda across. The implication is in order to cause Putin trouble or, in fact, unseat him. And this is directly in line with our warning over the BBC's pernicious charity, BBC Media Action. And if you haven't read it, please read the article, Subversion from Broadcasting House to Kazakhstan. And I'll just say, let's remember that the BBC, the report over the paedophile activity has come out. People abused, everyone knew about it, and yet this organisation says it's the organisation to tell other nation states how to conduct their business. Well, if we go in deeper into that Defence Committee, we pointed this out, which is happening tomorrow. This is Russia implications for the UK defence and security. We're very interested that they bring forth witnesses. Now, normally witnesses are to bring forth facts and truth. I absolutely question that. But this is what they say they're looking at, how the UK should manage its capabilities to engage with Russia whilst mitigating military confrontation. Putting your troops right on the Russian border, of course, is to mitigate confrontation. Explore the nature and extent of Russian military capabilities and the key elements and objectives of Russia's military policy and strategy. Understand the extent to which the UK has adequate information about Russian military capability. So, whether or not that sounds good, let's remember, of course, that David Cameron thinks that President Putin is so bad he eats children. UK column words, but we understand where we were going. So who are the witnesses? Well, this is where it gets very murky, because if you look at the witnesses called forward, these are all Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, placemen and women, mainly men. But there is no independence in these people at all. James Sher, Keir Giles here, Chatham House. This gentleman...
Łukasz Kulesa.
Yes, thank you, Mike, from the European Leadership Network. Sounds very common purpose, and of course it is. We've got gentlemen like this man, Mark Leahy. What's his experience? He's a journalist. And yet these people are being brought forward to brief the Defence Select Committee. This man here, Polish director of the NATO Information Office in Moscow. If you read their CVs, don't believe what I'm saying now, read the CVs and see for yourself that these people are full of vested interest. And they link through to this, the Defence Academy of the United Kingdom, and here we see these vested interests linked together with the government and senior military personnel. So this gentleman here, Sir Tom Phillips, also linked to Chatham House. These are the key questions. Who are they? Who elected them? How were they chosen to advise on defence? Who chose them? We don't know any of those answers. And of course, in the Defence Select Committee, nobody is pointing out the vested interests of Chatham House. So if we go on through, we've got Mark Alexander in the background. We've got this list of people, and here are some of the senior officers clearly bought off with positions of power and influence, and no doubt a few gin and tonics. But we couldn't resist this man who's also involved because he started out in Plymouth at the university. But we did note that he's boasting that during his career he's brought in the new Queen Elizabeth aircraft carriers. I still can't see those at the moment, Mike, but he's done a good job there. He's brought in the Type 45 destroyer. They're having major problems at sea.
Yeah, the engine failure.
Engine failure. He's brought in armoured fighting vehicles, artillery and munitions projects. Well, of course, UK doesn't produce any munitions. And he's also brought in the F-35 Lightning II aircraft, which doesn't work. So this is the quality of the people advising the government. Now it gets worse because the Independent here has this headline: drone technology a threat to Trident submarines, MPs are to be told. And it's a report from an organisation called BASIC, which is going to be presented to the Defence Select Committee. And it says rapid advances in technology means the world's oceans are becoming a sensor-rich environment full of drones with eyes and ears everywhere, and there's no hiding place for submarines. This, Mike, is such rubbish, it's almost difficult to comment on. But let's have a look at BASIC. They are discussing whether we should have Trident. They are claiming that drones are going to mean that Trident will be ineffective. This is comedy. I can only describe it as comedy. And here's the chief executive, Paul Ingram. Tried to call him this morning, but he doesn't appear to answer his phone. He says that basically the problem is that we keep saying that these submarines can't be tracked. That is absolute nonsense. Of course they can be tracked. They have been tracked for at least the last 20 years. The art is making sure they're not tracked. So this is a lie. And who funds this organisation? Well, have a look at this little lot. We've even got the Norwegians putting in some money. We've got Hewlett Foundation, Joseph Rowntree, Prospect Hill. Even the Swiss are helping to fund this organisation, which is calling for the removal of nuclear weapons, and it's briefing our MPs. But it gets better because the Defence Select Committee says they don't deal with government. So we were puzzled to find that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office are briefing an organisation briefing against Trident. What would you call this, Mike? Treason?
Incestuous treason, yes.
Yeah. Well, we sent the Defence Select Committee an email this morning asking if they can explain how, if they claim the Defence Select Committee is independent of government, they can be taking a report from BASIC, which is itself funded by the British government. And if you're not convinced, well, have a look at BASIC's website, where they have created the Trident Commission. Sounds official, but it's a group of unelected people. Don't worry though, because they say that every member of their team is highly respected and with particular deep experience within the British state and institutions close to it. And the first man they name, of course, is Malcolm Rifkin, who was kicked out of his job for insider semi-criminal dealings with Chinese companies.
Alleged.
Well, he certainly did resign. But this is the calibre of the people that is being put in front of our MPs in order to advise them on Britain's defence policy. And I'll just add that I was told this morning we now know why we have seen the steady decline in Britain's military capability, and that is because we now rely upon the European Union to tell us what our force levels can be. So David Cameron lying yet again to the public.
Okay, this is an interesting article in Foreign Affairs magazine. Of course, this is the publication of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's entitled "Paying Their Dues: How to Close Global Tax Loopholes." And it's very interesting because what they're of course talking about Google and Google's sort of repayment of corporation tax to the British government. They're also talking about the fact that the French government is asking for a lot more money. And they're talking about the fact that, of course, there's public anger about corporate tax loopholes, although they're saying that that isn't quite as strong in the United States as it is in the United Kingdom. But they end up by saying, as a result of everything that they say before, as a result, the global system of corporate tax has now outstripped its original premise. From the starting point that it's not fair to ask corporations to pay tax on the same income twice, the system has developed to the point where they often don't even have to do so once. And they say that in 2012, at a G20 summit, leaders tasked the OECD with finding a solution. And a year later, in 2013, and it was actually after the Bilderberg conference, that year, the OECD produced their design for what is effectively a global corporation tax system. Now, we believed at the time, and we said this at the time, that was one of the major agenda items on the Bilderberg conference in Watford in 2013, and certainly we seem to be heading ever more towards that. What this article says is the OECD have provided guidelines to its members, and it is now incumbent on each country's legislature to change laws and regulations accordingly. Once that is done, multinationals will have to share a complete set of global data as 2016 tax returns come in starting in early 2017. It may take some time for tax officials to absorb and digest all the information, but once they do, they will use it to make multinationals pay more. But that's only going to happen with a fully integrated global tax regime for corporations, which is heading towards global governance, surely?
Rapidly.
This is an interesting little report from the British Retail Consortium. They believe that the UK retail sector is going to lose 900,000 jobs imminently by certainly within the next 10 years. But the remaining jobs, they say, are going to be, quotes, more productive and higher earning. So there you go. 900,000 jobs to go. And they're saying that they are blaming the national living wage, and they're blaming the new apprenticeship levy, which are both George Osborne's initiatives. So they're blaming George Osborne for this. Now, we can blame George Osborne for many things, and we may do so in 1 second. But for this, I think that's being a bit. It's not really quite correct. What could the possible reason be for the collapse of retail? The retail sector in the UK. Perhaps it's simply a symptom of the collapse of the entire economy.
The money's not there, and people can't access their money anyway, Mike.
Well, that's right, but the economy in general absolutely collapsing. So here's a Wall Street Journal article from a few days ago, again reiterating this business of that there is no global trade going on. These ships are being mothballed. They're being mothballed. It's costing the companies $15,000 a week to mothball them. Sorry, a month to mothball them, and of course, many of these shipping companies going out of business as a result. So, if the retail sector in this country is losing 900,000 jobs, it seems to me that is more likely the reason for it, rather than the fact that George Osborne has gone as far as sticking another 50p on the minimum wage or whatever it is that he did.
Yep.
It's Osborne is to blame for this, but on a much broader economic level than just the living wage.
And certainly they're not talking about the underlying factors
Indeed.
which are doing it. Well, we just end on a note that if you want to know what the real problem in UK is, of course it is the pitiful quality of Britain's MPs. And we thought to give you a good example, we should return to Plymouth. And here he is, Plymouth's own MP, Oliver Colville. He sent out an electronic briefing that says his busy programme is how he's doing in the upcoming EU referendum, how he's voting. He's got pharmacy, he's got the National Hedgehog campaign, he's going to Norway, and he's having a look at Plymouth's transport links. And we're going to clean for the Queen campaign. Well, he can be sweeping up the streets for the Queen. I certainly won't. So all the things we've mentioned, we've got a dictatorship coming, we've got unemployment, we've got a privatised NHS, we've got the military being ripped apart. And the best this MP can do is stick to hedgehogs, because apparently his mum told him some very nice stories when he was younger. This is not funny, it's not amusing, this is sick, because of course on the background of the inability of this man to really focus on what he needs to, people are suffering, losing jobs, their families, whatever. It's up to us to take these people on, and they need to be brought to reality, and pretty quick. Thank you for joining us today. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.